The foreman started his day the same way he always did, walking the long path that ran along the edge of the construction zone. He liked checking the ground himself instead of waiting for others to report problems. It gave him peace and helped him think. The site was far from the main city, on land humans did not know well. Most days nothing unusual happened. But that morning felt different the moment he stepped out. The air carried a strange smell, faint but sharp, like something heated too fast. He paused for a moment, wondering if it came from the machines, but everything looked normal behind him. The smell came from ahead, drifting from a place they were not supposed to enter. He kept moving, following his routine, but his mind stayed focused on that scent. The land around the site was known to hold alien wildlife, creatures humans still did not fully understand. Most kept their distance, but every now and then workers saw shadows large enough to worry them. The foreman never saw anything up close. He assumed he never would. That belief changed when he reached the far corner of the route. The ground there was torn up in a way he had not seen before. Not a simple landslide or a machine mistake. The earth was scraped in long curves, almost like something heavy had crashed hard and dragged itself deeper into the valley. Scorch marks covered some of the rocks nearby, fresh enough that he could still smell what had burned. He crouched and touched the edges. The earth crumbled under his fingers as if something huge had hit it with force. He stood still for a long moment. There were stories among the workers about large winged creatures living in the valleys beyond the marked maps. Some claimed to have heard distant cries at night, deep and strong, not coming from anything humans brought to the planet. Most workers laughed those stories off, but now he was not so sure. Everything here felt wrong. Something big had been hurt or chased. He should have turned back. The safest thing to do was return to camp and report what he saw. But something kept pulling him toward the valley. Curiosity at first, then a slow feeling in his chest, like someone calling for help, even without a voice. He took a deep breath and stepped past the rocks, following the marks deeper inside. The further he walked, the clearer the signs became. Broken branches, crushed grass, small pools of dark liquid that made him stop every time he found one. It was not oil. It was not machine fluid. It looked like blood, but the shade was unlike anything he knew. He followed the trail until he reached the edge of a ravine where the ground dipped low. He stopped when he heard a sound that froze him completely. It was a low breath, deep, slow, painful. He crouched and leaned forward, unsure if he should look or run. The sound came again, this time with a weak, trembling growl. He gathered his courage and looked down. What he saw did not fit anything from his world. A large alien dragon lay curled at the bottom of the ravine. Her wings were bent in terrible angles, dragging along the ground like broken branches. Her scales, normally shining in stories people told, looked dull and cracked. She had tried to stand at some point, judging by the marks on the soil, but her body had fallen again and again. She looked exhausted, barely lifting her head as she breathed. But what he noticed next chilled him more than the sight of her wounds. Beside her were several small dragonlings, newborn from the looks of them. They were weak and silent, huddled close to her body. Their tiny wings barely moved. Their breaths were thin. They looked like they had been left to die along with their mother. It was a scene he never imagined he would witness. For a moment he could not move. His heart pounded, and fear washed through him. Even injured, the creature was massive. If she decided she saw him as a threat, he knew he would not stand a chance. But she did not roar or rise. She simply stared at him with tired eyes that held more fear than anger. Eyes that did not look dangerous at all, but desperate. He felt something shift inside him. The creature was not attacking him. She was too weak to defend herself or her young. Whoever or whatever had hurt her had left her here to die slowly. The thought filled him with anger. He did not know who could do something like this, but the marks on the ground and the nature of her wounds made it clear this had not been an accident. Someone had wanted her out of the way. He took one careful step closer, keeping his hands visible so she could see he carried nothing harmful. She tensed at first, curling her tail protectively around her dragonlings. But the movement caused her pain, and she let out a soft cry that echoed up the walls of the ravine. The sound was not loud. It was not threatening. It sounded like a plea. His heart felt heavy hearing it. He knew he could not leave her like this. The newborn dragonlings would not last long, and she would not either. He looked around, trying to figure out what he could do. He had no training in caring for alien creatures. He was just a foreman, a man who handled workers, tools, and schedules. But he was also a man who could not walk away from someone suffering, no matter if that someone was human or alien. He slowly slid down the side of the ravine, careful not to startle her with sudden movements. He spoke softly, though he knew she could not understand his words. Still, a calm voice felt better than silence. When he reached the bottom, he stopped several steps away, giving her space. She watched him closely, her breathing uneven, but she did not threaten him. He studied her injuries more closely. Both wings were broken in several places. The wounds looked recent, not more than a day old. Whoever attacked her had done it with a force meant to disable her quickly. The dragonlings pressed against her body, too frightened to move. They were smaller than he expected, barely reaching his knees in height. They had no strength of their own. He checked his pockets, though he knew he carried nothing useful. A small tool, a few wires, and a bit of food he had brought for himself. It was not enough to change anything. He looked back at the weakened creatures and felt a deep pull inside him. He had to help them, no matter how hard it would be. He stood slowly and backed away so the mother would not feel threatened. Once he climbed out of the ravine, he took one long look at her again. The dragon's eyes followed him, full of fear that he would leave and never return. He lifted a hand to show he understood. Then he turned and hurried back toward the site. His mind raced the entire way. He needed supplies. He needed help. But he also knew the workers would panic if he told them exactly what he had found. Some might try to harm the creature out of fear. Others might alert authorities, who would take the situation out of his hands in a way that might not save her. He needed to think carefully, but one thing was certain. He would not leave the mother dragon and her dragonlings to die. Not after seeing their condition. Not after hearing that sound of pain. Something inside him had changed the moment he saw them. He did not know why he felt so strongly about it, but he knew he could not ignore it. As he reached the edge of the camp, one thought repeated in his mind. He had discovered something living and vulnerable that needed him. And for reasons he did not fully understand yet, he felt responsible. He knew that whatever happened next, he would have to make difficult choices. But he was ready to face them, because he had found a mother fighting to stay alive for her young, and he could not walk away. The foreman reached the camp with fast steps, almost running, though he tried not to look panicked. He knew if he looked too shaken, people would ask questions, and he was not ready to explain anything yet. He walked straight to the tool station and grabbed a small bag, pretending he was checking supplies for a normal inspection. His hands shook slightly as he picked up bandages, a portable light, wire cutters, a water flask, and anything he thought might help. He knew none of it was meant for treating an alien creature, especially one so large. But it was better than returning empty-handed. A coworker saw him picking things too quickly and called out to him, asking if something was wrong. He forced a calm voice and said he was just going back for a second ground check. The coworker shrugged and went back to his task. The foreman felt a slight relief, but it didn't last long. He stepped away, moving toward his truck, when two more workers noticed him preparing to leave the site again. They asked if he wanted someone to join him because the far areas were sometimes unsafe. He said no. He preferred working alone for this part. They looked confused, but didn't argue. They trusted him. He had been working with them for a long time and rarely asked for anything unusual. Still, he felt their eyes on him, and he knew if he returned looking worse, they would question him harder. He got into the truck, took a deep breath, and drove toward the valley. His mind kept replaying the sight of the injured mother dragon lying in the dirt, her wings bent and useless. The memory of her pained breathing hit him again and again. He felt guilty for leaving her even for a short time, though he knew he needed supplies. He kept thinking about how she had looked at him, not with anger, but with fear and hope mixed together. On the way, he considered reporting the situation to the office, but he knew exactly how that would go. They would call officials. The officials would assess the creature as a threat. They would treat her as a danger to human construction. They might try to remove her, or worse. Even if they brought experts, they would not care about her dragonlings the way she did. To them, saving a wild alien creature would not be a priority. It would be a problem to remove, not a life to protect. He shook his head at the thought. No, he would not let that happen. Not after seeing her condition with his own eyes. When the valley came into view again, he stopped the truck quietly and carried the supplies by hand. The air felt even heavier this time, almost silent, except for the wind brushing through the leaves. He approached the ravine slowly, hoping she was still alive, fearing he might be too late. When he reached the edge, he saw her. She had not moved much. Her eyes were half open, and her breathing was slow, almost shallow. The dragonlings were still pressed against her side. One had started making small movements, trying to climb closer to her neck. The little one's breath sounded weak, but at least it was moving. The mother watched him with tired eyes as he carefully climbed down again. She did not growl. She did not tense up as much this time. Maybe she remembered him. Maybe she sensed he had returned to help. He knelt a few steps away from her and spoke in a calm voice, explaining what he planned to do, even though she could not understand the words. He hoped the tone mattered more than the meaning. He opened the bag slowly, showing her each item so she would not be startled. The dragon raised her head slightly, her eyes following his movements. Her tail tightened around her dragonlings, but she did not push him away. He moved to her injured wing first, only touching the ground near it, so she could see he was not there to harm her. The wing looked even worse up close. The bones were out of place, swollen and bruised. He could tell she had tried many times to pull it back into a normal position, but each attempt must have caused terrible pain. He knew he could not fully fix the break, but he could at least stabilize it to prevent further damage. He gathered long branches and pieces of wood lying nearby, adjusting them into rough supports. As he worked, the mother dragon watched carefully, letting out low breaths whenever he got too close to a sensitive spot. He paused each time, giving her a moment to calm down. She blinked slowly, almost like she understood he needed time too. When he finally touched her wing, he did it with the lightest pressure. She tensed but did not attack. He whispered soothingly, trying to reassure her. Gradually, he lifted the damaged wing into the wooden support. It was a slow, painful process, but she allowed it. The dragonlings squeaked softly, reacting to their mother's discomfort. He wished he could comfort them too, but even stepping this close was already more than he ever expected himself to do. After securing the support with cloth and rope, he gave her water from the flask. She stared at it for a moment, unsure. He placed it near her mouth. After a long hesitation, she touched her tongue to the water. When she realized it was safe, she drank. Not much, but enough to show she needed it. The Dragonlings also reached toward the droplets that spilled, licking them from her scales. Seeing that made something warm spread inside his chest. He hadn't saved them, not yet, but he had given them a chance. He prepared to move to the second wing when a sudden thought struck him. He had not checked her surroundings for danger. Earlier, he had seen strange marks near the valley. Heavy footprints. Scratches on trees. The idea that someone might return made him uneasy. If the creature had been attacked by illegal hunters, they could still be nearby. The thought of them coming back while she was helpless made his stomach tighten. He stood and looked around the ravine carefully. The valley was silent, but silence did not always mean safety. He could not leave her again, but he also could not fight off anyone by himself. Still, if hunters came, he would try. He knew that much. The thought frightened him, yet he felt a strange courage building. It did not come from strength. It came from knowing he could not let her suffer more. He returned to her second wing and repeated the same slow, careful work. This one was harder because the damage seemed deeper. She winced more, giving small, pained breaths. The Dragonlings huddled closer to her stomach, frightened each time she moved. He kept speaking softly, telling her that he was almost finished, that she needed to stay strong. He had no idea whether she understood, but it helped him stay calm. After what felt like hours, he finished supporting the second wing. The dragon let out a long, exhausted breath. Her eyes softened, and she looked at him in a way that felt strangely meaningful. It was not friendship. It was not trust yet. It was more like she saw him as someone who was trying, someone who did not want to hurt her. He stepped back to give her space and noticed she was shivering slightly. He took off his outer jacket and placed it near her Dragonlings. It would not warm them much, but it was something. They sniffed at it, confused, then curled slightly closer to it. Even that small reaction made him smile a little. As he stood there, thinking about what to do next, he felt the weight of reality settling on him. This was only the beginning. The mother dragon needed food, water, and rest. Her wings would not heal fast. The Dragonlings were too young to survive without help. And he was only one man with limited supplies. He wondered how many times he would have to sneak into the valley before someone at the camp noticed. He wondered whether he could keep this a secret for long. But he already knew his answer. He would return as many times as needed. He would carry more food, more water, more shelter materials. He would do everything he could. The dragon blinked slowly again, her eyes fixed on him. He felt something shift in that moment, something deeper than fear or caution. It was a silent understanding. She knew he had chosen to help her, and he knew he could not walk away now. He gathered his empty bag and prepared to leave before sunset. As he climbed out of the ravine, he felt her eyes following him. When he reached the top and looked back, she lowered her head gently, almost like a gesture of acknowledgement. He whispered that he would return. Then he walked back toward the camp, knowing that his life had just changed in ways he never expected. The foreman barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the injured dragon lying helpless in the ravine, with her small dragonlings pressed against her side. He kept hearing the sound she made when he touched her broken wing. It wasn't loud, but it had stayed in his head like a soft echo that refused to fade away. He sat on his small bed, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking about what he needed to do next. He knew he had stepped into something much bigger than he expected. Helping her once was not enough. If he wanted her and her young to survive, he would need to return again and again. He would need food, water, shelter tools, and enough supplies to keep her alive until she recovered. And all of that needed to be done without alerting the workers at the camp. He sighed deeply and rubbed his face. He was just a foreman, not a trained rescuer. He didn't have special knowledge or special equipment, but he had a strong feeling inside him that wouldn't let him turn away from this responsibility. Before dawn even touched the horizon, he got up, dressed quietly, and walked outside. Everyone else was still asleep. The camp was silent, except for the humming of machines cooling down in the distance. He went to the storage area and picked up items one by one, trying not to make noise. He took food containers, extra cloth, long ropes, a small toolkit, and a portable heater he hoped would keep the Dragonlings warm. He filled a larger water container too, knowing the mother dragon would need a lot of water to stay hydrated. He felt a small worry rise inside him as he looked at the growing pile of items. If someone noticed missing supplies, they would start asking questions. He tried to keep the items limited to older tools and leftovers that workers rarely touched. It would hopefully go unnoticed. By the time the sun was starting to rise, he loaded everything into the back of his truck. He got in, took one last glance at the quiet camp, and drove toward the valley. The road felt longer today. He drove slower than usual, thinking about what dangers might be waiting for him. He kept remembering the strange marks on the trees the day before, signs that someone else had been in that valley. If illegal hunters had attacked the mother dragon, they could come back at any time. The thought made him tighten his grip on the steering wheel. When he reached the valley, he parked his truck behind a large boulder to keep it hidden. He gathered the supplies, taking only what he could carry in one trip. He would return for the rest later. He walked through the trees quietly, listening for any signs of movement. The valley had the same heavy silence as yesterday, the type of silence that made a person feel watched even when no one was there. As he approached the ravine, he slowed down. He didn't want to surprise her. He reached the edge and looked down. A long breath of relief left him when he saw she was still alive. She was lying in the same position as before, her wings supported by the makeshift wooden braces he had set around them. Her eyes opened slowly as he came into view. She didn't growl. She didn't tense up. Instead, she watched him with tired but calmer eyes. The Dragonlings noticed him too. They lifted their tiny heads, blinking sleepily. They still looked weak, but more alert than the day before. That small change filled him with hope. He climbed down carefully and placed the supplies near her. The mother dragon lowered her head slightly, her chest rising and falling with slow breaths. She seemed to recognize him now, or at least she recognized that he was not there to harm her. He started with the water container, placing it close to her mouth. She sniffed it and then drank without hesitation. She drank more than yesterday. The Dragonlings also licked the water that dripped from her mouth onto the ground. He smiled a little at that. They were trying to stay strong, just like their mother. He took out the portable heater next and turned it on. A soft, warm glow spread across the ground. He placed it near the Dragonlings, but careful enough not to disturb them. The tiny creatures leaned toward the warmth almost immediately. One even stretched its small wing out, as if enjoying the temperature. Seeing that made him feel strangely proud, like he had done something right. Then he moved to check the wooden supports he had built around her wings. Some of the ropes had loosened, so he tightened them gently. She winced once, but not as much as yesterday. That meant the swelling was starting to decrease. He felt encouraged by that. While he worked, he kept talking softly. He told her what he was doing. He told her she needed to stay strong for her young. His voice stayed low and steady. He didn't know if she understood anything he said, but somehow speaking helped him feel connected to the moment. It reminded him that this was real, not something from a dream or story. After securing her wings, he moved on to small tasks, cleaning the dirt around her wounds, adjusting the blankets under the Dragonlings, and clearing sharp rocks from the area so she wouldn't get hurt if she tried to move. Each task took time, and he worked carefully to avoid causing her pain. The dragon watched him the entire time, her eyes following every movement. There was no anger in those eyes now, only exhaustion and a quiet acceptance. She seemed to know he was trying his best. While he worked, a sudden rustling sound came from the trees above the ravine. He stopped instantly and turned his head. The mother dragon also reacted, lifting her head with sudden alertness. Her tail stiffened, and the dragonlings curled closer to her. The foreman held his breath, listening carefully. The leaves swayed again. It was not the wind. The sound was too controlled, too heavy. He looked up toward the direction of the noise. For a moment, he saw a shadow move behind the trees. Someone or something was there, watching. His heart started pounding faster. He knew he wasn't imagining it. The hunters could be back. Maybe they had come to check if the dragon finally died. Maybe they planned to take something from her body. His throat tightened at the thought. He walked slowly to the side of the ravine and scanned the trees. But the shadow didn't appear again. After a few moments, the forest grew silent once more. When he turned back to the mother dragon, she was staring at him. Her eyes were wide and alert, filled with fear. She sensed the danger even more than he did. She let out a quiet sound, a protective rumble meant to shield her dragonlings. He stepped closer and spoke softly, trying to calm her. He wasn't sure if she could be calmed in a moment like this, but he had to try. He didn't want her to panic and injure herself further. He placed his hand gently on the wooden support of her wing and whispered again that he would stay with her. The dragon blinked slowly, calming slightly. Her breathing steadied again, though she still watched the edge of the ravine. He knew he needed a plan now. If hunters returned, he needed to protect her. He was only one man, but he wasn't going to let harm come to her or her dragonlings. He looked up at the sky. The sun was rising higher, offering more light. He would use the daylight to improve her shelter. He would build a stronger cover, something that could hide her from anyone passing near the valley. He gathered sticks, branches, and spare cloth from his supplies. He worked quickly, building a rough barrier around part of the ravine wall to block her from open view. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. As he worked, he kept looking over his shoulder, checking the trees. The shadow didn't appear again, but the sense of being watched stayed with him. By the time he finished, hours had passed. The mother dragon seemed slightly more comfortable now. The dragonlings were resting again, their tiny breaths steady and peaceful. He sat down on a large rock and took a moment to breathe. His body was tired, and his arms ached from lifting and tying materials. But the exhaustion felt honest. It felt meaningful. After resting a moment, he fed the dragonlings tiny pieces of soft fruit he had brought. They sniffed the food first, unsure. Then one took a small bite. Another followed. Soon all of them were nibbling on the food. The sight filled him with a warm relief. They needed strength, and this was a start. He looked at the mother dragon again. She was watching him with calmer eyes now. She lowered her head slightly, almost like a quiet gesture of respect or trust. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't big, but it was real. He felt a soft pull in his chest when he saw that. He spent a while longer with them, making sure everything was stable. Then, when the sun began sinking, he stood and prepared to leave. The mother dragon lifted her head slightly, as if asking where he was going. He whispered that he would return the next day. He climbed out of the ravine and walked back toward his truck. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. The earlier shadow still troubled him, but he pushed forward as he drove back to camp. One thought kept repeating in his mind. He was no longer helping them out of curiosity or chance. He was helping them because he cared, because they depended on him, because he couldn't imagine turning his back on them now. And deep down, He knew something was coming, something dangerous, but he would face it when it arrived, because the mother dragon and her young needed him, and he was not going to fail them. The next day, the foreman woke before sunrise. His body ached from the previous day, but he didn't feel tired. He had no choice but to return to the dragon and her dragonlings. The image of the mother's weakened wings and the fragile creatures clinging to her burned in his mind. He could not ignore them. Not now, not ever. He packed food, water, and extra tools, double-checking everything. Today, he planned to stay longer in the valley. He wanted to strengthen her shelter and make sure the dragonlings had enough to eat. He also had to remain alert. Yesterday's shadow in the trees reminded him that someone could still be watching the valley. Whoever had attacked her before might return that as he drove toward the valley. He thought about what he could do if hunters came back. He had no weapons, only his courage and quick thinking. That would have to be enough. He refused to leave her vulnerable, no matter what. When he arrived at the valley, he paused at the edge, scanning the area. Everything seemed quiet, but he noticed fresh footprints on the soft ground near the ravine. They were larger than his own, and the impressions were deep, showing weight. His stomach tightened. Hunters had returned. They had been here while he slept. He quietly moved down the path toward the dragon. As he approached, he saw her mother's eyes lift in alarm. She had sensed the intruders. The dragonlings pressed closer, trembling. The foreman's heart raced. He had to act carefully. Any sudden movement could provoke the mother or draw attention from the hunters. He crouched near the entrance of the makeshift shelter and whispered softly to the dragon, assuring her he was there to protect her. Slowly she calmed, though her gaze never left the shadows among the trees. He scanned the trees again, trying to make sense of the movements. The hunters were careful, not rushing. They had likely been hiding, studying the valley to see if the dragon was still alive. Their intentions were clear. They wanted something from her. He didn't know if it was her wings, her scales, or just the chance to capture a rare creature, but he knew it could not happen. He thought fast. There was no time to climb trees or set traps, and he had no weapons. But he did have the element of surprise. He grabbed a few large branches and some rocks from the valley floor. If they came closer, he could make noise and draw attention, startling them. He also knew the terrain better than anyone. If they tried to chase him, he could lead them into the ravine edges and narrow paths. Suddenly, a hunter stepped out from behind a tree. He froze, but the foreman did not panic. He raised his hand and shouted loudly, throwing a rock at a tree to create a crashing sound. The hunter flinched, and the others appeared from behind the trees, looking around. The mother dragon reacted instinctively. She rose slightly, her wings trembling but still supported by the braces. She let out a low, rumbling growl that echoed through the valley. It was a sound that shook the ground. The foreman noticed the hunter's pause, their eyes widening at the sight of her. Even weakened, she looked massive and terrifying. The foreman took a deep breath. He knew this moment could decide everything. He stepped forward, shouting at the hunters, waving his arms to make them step back. His heart pounded, but he did not move closer to the dragon. She was the one in danger, not him. One of the hunters stepped toward her anyway. The dragon rose slightly, spreading her wings with effort. Even with the broken support, the sight of her massive wings spreading was enough to make the intruder hesitate. She growled again, deeper and louder this time. The dragonling squeaked, but stayed hidden behind her. The foreman seized the moment. He yelled and threw another rock, crashing it against the valley wall to echo loudly. The sound startled the hunters, and they stumbled back. The mother dragon hissed and lifted her head higher, opening her mouth in a silent warning. The hunters looked at each other, unsure if they should stay. Their hesitation gave him the edge. He stepped closer, showing no fear. The dragon's eyes met his, almost as if she was asking whether he would protect them. He nodded to her in the faintest gesture, and she seemed to understand. The hunters took one more cautious step, but the foreman's courage did not falter. He stomped the ground, shouted, and waved his arms. The dragon added her low rumbles, making the sound grow louder. The hunters' confidence broke. They retreated quickly, disappearing into the trees without another look. The foreman stood there, chest heaving, eyes wide. The mother dragon slowly lowered herself back down to the ground, her wings trembling but intact. She leaned slightly against the wooden support, resting. The dragonlings moved closer to her, nuzzling against her side. He crouched and touched the support lightly, whispering that they were safe for now. The dragon's eyes softened. For a moment, there was a quiet connection between them. No words, only trust. The foreman knew this was just the beginning. More challenges would come, but they had survived the first real threat together. That gave him hope. He spent the rest of the day strengthening the shelter. He used larger branches, tying them carefully with ropes, so that the mother dragon could rest safely without being fully exposed to the sky. He added more blankets and soft materials for the dragonlings, arranging them so they could warm themselves near her. He also prepared food, small portions for the young, and water for both the mother and her children. Every time he placed food near the dragonlings, she watched him carefully, her eyes narrowing slightly. She did not attack. She only observed. He understood that in her world, any approach could be a threat. His patience and care were slowly breaking through her fear. As the sun began to set, he finally allowed himself to rest. He sat on a rock, watching the valley. The mother dragon closed her eyes, but kept her head raised slightly. The dragonlings had fallen asleep near her. He felt a warmth in his chest. They had survived another day. Even as he rested, his mind raced. He thought about the hunters. If they returned, he needed a plan. He thought of ways to fortify the shelter even more. He considered using fallen trees and rocks as natural barriers. He knew he had limited resources, but he also knew the terrain better than anyone. The valley was his advantage if he used it carefully. Night fell, and he stayed close to the shelter. He made small noises to ensure the mother dragon and dragonlings were not startled, checking on them quietly. Every movement was slow and deliberate. He wanted them to feel safe with him. Hours passed. The stars appeared above the valley. The air was calm. He watched the mother dragon breathe slowly, her body relaxing slightly. She still had injuries, but she was alive. Her dragonlings were safe. And for now, that was enough. He whispered to himself that they would survive together, that he would not let anyone harm them again. He felt a strange bond forming, not just as a helper, but as someone who truly belonged in that moment with them. The foreman realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite fear. He had faced the hunters with nothing but determination, and they had left. He had no certainty about the future, but he had made a choice to protect them no matter what. By the time he finally left the valley, darkness covered the land. He climbed out of the ravine slowly, looking back one last time. The mother dragon lifted her head slightly, as if acknowledging him. He nodded back, silently promising he would return. He drove back to the camp in quiet thought. The hunters might return, injuries might worsen, challenges would grow, but he knew one thing clearly. The mother dragon and her dragonlings had someone fighting for them, someone who would not abandon them, and that thought kept him awake the entire drive back, not with fear, but with a new determination that would carry him through whatever came next. The foreman woke early again, the valley already visible in the distance through the faint morning light. His body ached from climbing, carrying supplies, and staying alert during the previous days, but he did not feel tired. He had slept little, Yet there was a strange energy inside him, a sense that something was about to change. Today, he thought, might be the day the dragon's life truly turned toward healing. He packed everything carefully, carrying extra food for the dragonlings, more water for the mother, and some soft blankets he had found near the camp. He also brought long branches and rope, thinking he could improve the shelter once again. He knew the shelter was still fragile, but it was all he could do for now. The valley was quiet as he drove, the early sun casting long shadows across the hills. He had not seen any signs of hunters so far that morning, but he remained cautious. When he arrived at the valley, he stopped for a moment at the edge and took a deep breath. The ravine lay ahead, peaceful and still. Then he saw her, the mother dragon, lifting her head as he approached, wings trembling slightly, but supported firmly by the wooden braces. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he felt she looked at him with something more than fear or wariness. There was recognition, and perhaps even gratitude. The dragonlings were already awake, stretching their tiny limbs and moving closer to their mother. They looked stronger than yesterday. Their breathing was steadier, and they had begun to explore their immediate area, testing their balance on the ground. The sight gave him a small, hopeful smile. He carried the supplies to the shelter carefully, placing water and food near the mother dragon first. She drank slowly, but more confidently than before, seeming to realize he meant no harm. Then he offered food to the dragonlings. They approached cautiously, sniffing the offerings. One of them pecked at the food, then looked up at their mother. She watched them quietly, her head low but her eyes alert. Gradually, the others followed, and soon all 3 dragonlings were eating small amounts of soft fruit and leaves. The foreman took this moment to inspect the mother dragon's wings. They were healing slowly. The bruises were fading, and the wooden supports were holding. He adjusted a few ropes carefully, making sure not to cause any discomfort. The dragon tensed for a moment when he touched her wings, but he whispered softly to her, and she relaxed again. He then turned his attention to the shelter. Using branches, rope, and blankets, he reinforced the walls to give her a more protected area. He even dug small trenches around the base to prevent water from pooling if it rained. Every movement was deliberate. Every sound was measured. The mother dragon watched, and the dragonlings occasionally waddled close to inspect his work. Hours passed. He took breaks only when he could not stand anymore, sitting near the edge of the shelter and looking at the valley around them. The peace of the morning was deceptive. He still thought about the hunters. They could return at any moment. He also thought about the future. He could not stay here forever. Eventually, she would need to fly again. He had no idea how she would manage with broken wings once they were fully healed. As he pondered these thoughts, he noticed movement in the distance. It was subtle, almost like a ripple in the trees. His heart quickened. He scanned the area carefully, but there were no hunters. It was just the wind, or maybe a small animal. Still, the mother dragon tensed slightly, her head raising, nostrils flaring. She did not move aggressively, just cautiously. He understood immediately. She had learned from her first encounter. She was aware now of threats, even when they were not obvious. The foreman spent the afternoon caring for the dragonlings. He held them gently when they struggled to reach the water. He guided them to the food and ensured they were safe from rocks or sharp branches. Every movement required patience. Every sound required caution. He realized that in a way, the dragonlings were like children he had to protect, and the mother trusted him enough to let him do it. Later in the day, as the sun started to sink toward the horizon, something incredible happened. The mother dragon attempted to rise on her legs. She was still weak, her wings trembling under the strain, but she lifted herself fully off the ground. She swayed slightly, balancing on her powerful legs, and the dragonlings scrambled to follow her. The foreman held his breath, not daring to move, she tried to stretch her wings. The wooden braces held them steady, preventing further injury. For a few seconds, she seemed unsure. Then, with a small push from her strong back legs, she managed to lift slightly off the ground, her wings flapping gently. She was flying just a little, but it was enough to see that she had strength left. The Dragonlings watched, curious and inspired. One of them stretched its tiny wings and tried a small hop. It stumbled, fell, but tried again. The others followed. The mother watched them closely, hissing softly to encourage them. The foreman felt his chest swell with pride. He had never expected to witness something like this. He spent the evening helping the Dragonlings practice small hops, guiding them and making sure they were safe. The mother rested, still watching over them, her wings gradually regaining strength. The air in the valley seemed to hum with life. For the first time since he discovered them, it felt like hope was stronger than fear. Night came, and he stayed near the shelter, keeping the heater on for the Dragonlings and adjusting blankets around them. He did not sleep. He sat quietly, listening to their breathing, watching the mother rest with one eye open. She had begun to trust him, a trust he felt deeply in return. He realized he had grown attached to them, not just as creatures to protect, but as lives that had become part of his world. The next morning, he returned early again, bringing more food and checking on the shelter. The mother dragon's wings looked stronger. She stretched them fully without fear. The Dragonlings were moving more confidently, even attempting small hops and flutters of their wings. He knew it would take weeks before they could fly fully, but he could already see progress over the following days. The foreman focused on strengthening the shelter, preparing food, and giving them water. He made small improvements, reinforcing the supports, clearing sharp stones, and building small barriers to prevent falls. Each day, the mother dragon and her young became stronger. Their trust in him grew. She allowed him to come closer, sometimes even letting him touch her side or wings lightly. It was not affection in human terms, but it was something close, a silent acknowledgement that he was helping them survive. Weeks passed. The mother dragon's wings were almost fully healed. She moved with grace and strength, occasionally flapping and rising a few feet off the ground. The Dragonlings followed her example, flapping their small wings and hopping from safe spots. The valley, once a place of danger and fear, had become a home for them and a place of purpose for him. One day, the foreman realized it was time. The mother dragon had to fly freely with her young. He gathered them together and guided them to the edge of the ravine. The mother stretched her wings fully. The Dragonlings spread theirs too, flapping with cautious determination. The foreman stepped back, giving them space. She lifted off first, her wings strong and full of power. The Dragonlings followed, clumsy at first, then gradually finding their rhythm. The sight was breathtaking. They rose above the valley, gliding and flapping together. The foreman watched, unable to blink, feeling a strange mixture of joy, relief, and awe. When they were high enough, the mother dragon turned slightly in the air, lowering her head as if to acknowledge him. She hovered for a brief moment, Dragonlings circling her. Then they soared higher and disappeared over the hills. The foreman stood alone in the valley, the wind brushing his face. He felt an emptiness, yes, but also an incredible sense of fulfillment. He had saved them. He had kept them safe. And they had survived because of his courage and care. Days later, he returned to the valley one last time. The mother dragon and her Dragonlings had left, but she left something behind. A single large scale rested where she had stood, glinting in the sunlight. He picked it up, feeling the smooth texture and warmth. It was a reminder, a sign of trust and gratitude, that even a creature so alien could recognize his care. The foreman returned to the camp, his life forever changed. He became known quietly among the workers for his dedication, for disappearing at strange hours, for returning with small stories of survival and courage. Eventually, authorities and wildlife specialists learned of his actions. His example inspired better protection for alien creatures on the frontier, regulations that ensured no mother dragon or young would be abandoned to die again, though he never saw them again. The memory of the mother dragon and her young stayed with him. The image of her lifted wings, the dragonling's first flutters, and her silent acknowledgement would remain a part of him forever. He realized that sometimes saving a life meant risking your own comfort and safety, but it also meant creating bonds that lasted far longer than words. He had gone to the valley as a foreman. He returned as a protector, a witness to something extraordinary, and someone who had been entrusted with life itself. And that, he thought, was the greatest reward of all.